helping you with real estate, Mr. Mike Johnston.
Today is building block number 2. So let's switch this over for a second. And I'm just going to show you on the screen our calendar of events. So the other day we did number 1, September 1st, searching for properties in Paragon and Navica. And just a reminder, if you needed to sign up for one of those, if let's say that you're in Idaho Falls and you wanted to sign up for Paragon, you could download this form so you'd have read-only access, and that's where you could download it. And the handout's right there that explains a little bit more about it. We will post that meeting online so you can see it. Then today, here's the handout. So if you want to, go ahead and click on there and download the handout. Now this, for those of you that are joining, professionalrealestateschool.com is the website. And you can scroll down and it has the calendar of what we're doing, and you could download that handout. That handout for today will help you a lot. So please download that, and it shows what we're going to be going over. Okay? So with that said, let us begin. Okay. First off, I'm just going to follow the handout a little bit, so if you want to follow that somewhat, you'll see it. It's very good information for us. Lockboxes. I was going to go into the office today and pick up a lockbox, but I didn't have time. I had a lot of different calls. So I think we all know what a lockbox looks like, and we can go through that. So we have the blue lockboxes. Now those lockboxes, when we have those are designed to help us to get into the properties. Now, when we have these lock boxes, we need to make sure that we can access them. So you have your phone is one way you can do it. And on your phone, you can have a program called the Supra eKey. Now on here, as you can kind of see, you need to update it. At the very bottom, you can press that update button. So right there. So I'll press my update button and it will update my eKey. And when it does that, it says updating across the top. Once it's done updating, you can use your phone to open up the lock boxes. Now when you go to the property and you want to open it up, you first have to touch the lock box. So you push up on the very bottom of it, the key holder, you'll tap that up and the lights on the lock box will light up. When the light on the lock box is locked up, you can use your program here, and down at the very bottom it says obtain key. So right there where you can see that key, obtain key, you'll click that. And on there it asks you for your 4-digit PIN code. So you enter your 4-digit PIN code, and after you've done that, it starts to make a sound. And that means it's trying to communicate with the lockbox. And in a moment it'll go da-da, but mine won't because I don't have a lockbox, but that means it's ready to open. So then you push the very bottom part of the lockbox and you'll be able to open that lockbox up. Now, we've opened up the lockbox. The same type of thing you can do is open up the shackle. So if it's your particular lockbox and you need to remove it or place it on a property, you do the same exact thing that we just talked about, except for you're going to click on open shackle, which is on that screen as well. And you'll enter your shackle code, which when you get a lockbox checked out, staff will give you the 4-digit shackle code. And I'm not going to say what our default code is in case somebody from some other company is listening to it, but we have one that we use a lot, but there's others that could be available as well. Okay? So then you can remove it and put it onto the other property. Now that you understand how to open up the property with the lockbox, let's talk a little bit about it. You, as a licensee, have gone through a background check. Do you remember paying that extra money and they did a background check for you and said you're okay to sell real estate? Well, that background check, the fingerprints and everything, is to make sure that you're a good person. Now, we cannot lend out our key or let somebody else open up the lock boxes for us. Why? That's a $5,000 fine from the MLS, and you will be fined. So do not share your key with other people. The other thing is you can't even give it to your assistant or somebody else to use it. Now you can, however, have the lockbox open, the shackle off the top, and you could have an assistant take it and place it on the home because they can lock it and put the key in the bottom. That would be permitted. But letting somebody take a key to go open it or to go take it off the property with the shackle code, you will be fined by the multiple listing service. So do not do that. When can you place a lockbox on a property? When you have the property listed, you can have a lockbox on the property. If it's a coming soon, the MLS does not let you put one on the property. Let's say you have 20 rentals and you think it would be cool to put these on the rentals so that if when you showed them, you didn't have to carry keys around. That's not permitted either. It's for access to properties that are listed on the multiple listing service for other people. Okay, so keep that in mind as well. Do not open the door for somebody and leave it open. Let's say that you have a home inspector that's coming over and you want to open up the door, so you go ahead and open it up and leave the door unlocked and then leave. Or maybe for a buyer to look at because it's not convenient for you. You cannot do that. The real estate, it's against the law. The law says that your failure to account for entrusted property. So if you do that, you will be looked at by the Real Estate Commission and it can get to the point where you can lose your license. Haven't seen anybody lose it yet from that, but I've seen reprimands and fines in excess of $2,000 at times. So please keep that in mind. On the sheet of paper that I gave you, here it has a little web link. So if you use this web link, it will, let's just double click on it. Well, it's not going to do it that way, but I'm going to go to the website. So there's a login that you can go to. That's the Supra login. So you have a username and password. Mine just did it automatically real quick. But you can go in and see who's shown the properties for you. You can set it up in here, and I advise you to go in there and take a little look at it, but you can go in and set it up so it can email you when somebody shows your listing. You can have a little survey. It can survey the people and say, how did the showing go? On a scale of 1 to 10, you know, there's a few things that you can ask. Now, this only will happen when you put the lockbox on the property, and when you do that and open up the shackle code, it will ask you if you want to assign the lockbox to you. If you say yes, then it becomes part of your inventory. If you take the lockbox back to the office and you didn't clear it out of your inventory and the next person doesn't know how to do that, you're going to continue getting notices that somebody's showing that property because it's based on the lockbox. So when you get a property, make sure you assign it to you. And when you're done with the lockbox, before you take that back to the office to turn it in, you make sure that you've taken it out of your inventory. Okay? Now, staff is more than happy to check out lockboxes to you. They have a sign-in sheet and a way to keep track of that. If for some reason you lose it, I believe it's $112 for the lockbox, and you'll be assessed that. Okay? So be very cautious with it. So when you bring it in, make sure that they check it off for you, and when you check it out, they'll write it down. Okay? Any questions about the lockboxes or with Supra in general? Good. All right, so moving on from Supra, and I'd ask you to go ahead and take a look at that a little bit more online because you'll see what you can do with the Supra side, but it's so much stuff to go through and we just have an hour to go through all these different things. Contacting a person's customer or client. There are teams in our office, there are teams in our town, and there's other people that are making calls to people. And right here it says, I've received phone calls from sellers that are upset. People are saying, I'm getting contacted, they're asking me how the showing's going, if I've had any showings, if we've got any offers, and if they need help from us in any way, shape, or form. We should not be contacting other people's customers or clients. If the property is currently listed, you do not call them or approach them. Another thing happens if someone were to contact you and they're under a buyer representation agreement with another agent, then you have to make sure that you understand that we should not be talking about things with that particular person. They need to work things out with their existing agent if they have a problem. What you can say is contact their broker. If you're having a hard time with the agent, contact the broker and he or she could assist you to try to get those things resolved. When I get a call from somebody, I first off want to find out what the problem is. If they're concerned about something with the agent, I want to talk to the agent because typically there's a misunderstanding of some sort. It could be failure to communicate, not contacting the people on a time frame that they want, or their expectations are different. So you always want to make sure that you understand what it is that the people you're working with expect from you so you can do those things and excel at that. Okay? So the law states a little bit more about this, just so you know. This is the license law from the Real Estate Commission. It shall be unlawful for any person, licensed or unlicensed, to interfere with a contractual relationship between a broker and a client. Then in the Snake River Rules and Regulations, soliciting of a listing filed with the service. This section isn't, so it talks about that you shall not solicit a listing or on a property filed with the service, so something on the MLS, unless such solicitation is consistent with Article 16 of the Realtor's Code of Ethics. And that's what this is. So let's read the ones that I've highlighted. This section is intended to encourage sellers to permit their properties to be filed with the service by protecting them from being solicited prior to expiration of the listing by brokers and salespersons seeking the listing upon its expiration. So by putting it in the MLS and you have a contact information, we are saying that we won't go out and try to solicit these other listings. We have their numbers there to help us all be able to see the property and set up showings. It says, without such protection, a seller could receive hundreds of calls, communications, and visits from brokers and salespersons who have been made aware through the MLS filing of the date of the listing will expire and desire to substitute themselves for the present broker. This section is also intended to encourage brokers to participate in the service by assuring them that other participants will not attempt to persuade the seller to breach the listing agreement or to interfere with their attempts to market the property. So that right there is key. We agree by being part of the MLS that we will not solicit other people's sellers. And some people say, oh, it's always so good to go through there. Well, if you want to go through and take a look at some of those things, once the property has expired, you can search for those and contact them afterwards if you'd like. But beforehand, no. And if for some reason you're calling for sale by owners and it turns out to be that these people have listed with somebody, or you're calling these expireds and you contact them and find out that they've relisted, immediately you should stop and say, oh, they're going to do a great job for you. Continue with those people. If there's anything that's wrong or you have a concern in the future, please call me. But we do not solicit or take over somebody else's property or listing or start talking bad about another agent. All right? Setting up showings. Okay, the other day we went through on the MLS and we did both different MLSs, Navica and Paragon, and we showed how to search for the properties. So that's the key part. So what I typically do, and you can do it different ways, but what I'll do is I'll find my top 4. Well, why do you say top 4? How much time do you have? Let's go through a few things. How much time do you have to show these people properties? A couple hours? There's only so many that people can keep in their mind. So I typically try to show 4 properties. If I need to, I might do 6. But let's say we're going to do 4 different properties. So as I go through the properties, I'll print them off and I'll have myself a printout, and then I'll have a customer version for them that doesn't have the confidential information on there that I can give to them. So I'll have those papers in front of me. I'll look at them, and then what I'm going to do is make sure that these are the right ones. Then after I've done that, I will get a map or look online, whatever way you want to do it, and I'll try to figure out where these homes are. Now on the different MLSs, you can have it charted and it will show you, but then you look and you find out, what's the order? Where do I want to drive? How am I going to get to these properties? And then I'll order these in that particular order. So my first one will be the one that I'm going to start off with. The second one, the one I'm going to go to, third and fourth. So I have them in order. So far, that makes sense. Emily, I like your smile. Anyway, okay, so now I have the 4 things written down or in order. Now sometimes properties sell, and it would be kind of bad if you set it up to show something and it has sold. So let's take a look at my sheet of paper that I have down for us. So we find it on the MLS, we narrow it down to 4 or 5 properties. How many is too many? You know, people can start to get a little tired. Organize the route, mark them on a map, put them in the showing or the drive order, so I have them in the order. Figure out a time frame for the route. So I'll start off with the first one. If I'm supposed to meet these people at the office at 10 o'clock and it's about a 15-minute drive to the first property, then what I'm going to do is on the first one, I'll put down a time frame for what I'm thinking about. So I'll write that down on here. So on the first one, I might say 10:15 to 11:15. You're saying, well, that's an hour. It doesn't take that long to show a home. I know. But if I got there at 10:20, because the people were a little bit late, I have a time frame for the seller to be gone. And then after that, I know from 10:15, if everything went on time, and I start off at the 10:15, and when would my next one be? Well, it's relatively close. So I could say 10:30 to 11:45, and I start to expand the back section out a little bit more for time. The third one, possibly 10:45 to 12:15. The fourth one, 11 to about 12:45. That way I have a time slot that I ask that these people will be gone from their home and that I'll be able to be there. So I have that written down. Now, once I've done that, what's my next step? I'll take that first one and I'm going to call the agent. So on this first one, I'll get on my phone and I'll call the agent because it says who has it listed. And I'll say, hey, so-and-so, this is Mike Johnston with Keller Williams Realty East Idaho. How you doing? Great. I'm calling to find out if, and I look at the address on the piece of paper, if 397 East, 81st North, your listing there, if it's still available. Oh, yeah, it is. You know, we've had some activity, and they talk a little bit about it. I say, great. Well, I'm thinking about showing it between 10:15 and 11:15 tomorrow. Do you think that would work out? Oh, yeah, the sellers are going to be gone or this or that, or I'll let them know, or go ahead and give them a call. They'll say something. Now, when I do that, I typically am going to ask them, is there a lockbox on the property? Even though it says so, most of the time, I'll just double check and they go, oh, yeah, it's on the side railing or something. So I'll make a note. Great. Well, is there anything else that I need to know about the property? Well, there's this or there's that. And they'll tell me a few things. That front door might stick a little bit with the key or things. So I'll write a few things down. Then I'll ask, do the sellers typically leave the home when there's a showing? And they'll let us know that. Sometimes it could be a tenant. Now, if there's a tenant in the property, the home may not show as well. So I like to write that down so I can explain that to my buyers. And sometimes when there's tenants, the tenants don't want to leave. They want to stay there when the property is being shown because they're concerned. They don't know what's going on. This doesn't happen to them all the time. Here's some strangers looking through all their stuff. So you have to understand that part too. Okay. Let's see. I also double check if there's any pets. Because sometimes when they list it, they don't put down that there's a pet. Oh yeah, there's this cat. And it will run out when you open the door. So be very cautious. The cat's name is Bilbo or whoever, you know. So then you know the name of the cat and you write it down. Now, if they say that they're going to set it up for you, that's fine. Let them do it. And then you can mark on your piece of paper. I circle the name of the agent because that's who I spoke to, and I can put down that time frame. I circle it so I know that I'm okay. Let's say that they want me to contact the sellers, which I like to do because I always like to talk to people. Now remember, I'm not taking away their clients. I'm not going to talk about other stuff. I'm setting up an appointment. So I'll get on the phone and they'll answer and I'll say, hi, this is Mike Johnston with Keller Williams Realty East Idaho. How are you today? Great. Is this so-and-so? Because they'll have the names down. Yes, it is. I'm calling to find out if your home's still available and if I could show it tomorrow. Yeah, it's still available. We've had some activity or something like that. I don't go into details, but I just find that part out because sometimes you can't reach the agent, so I'm contacting these guys. Oh yeah, it's still available. Good. I'd like to show it tomorrow between 10:15 and 11:15. Would that work out for you? Yeah, it would. So there's a lockbox on the door, right? Yes, it's on the front door. Well, it's on the railing, so you should be able to get in. Okay, so you guys will be gone, and I'll use the key to come in, and I'll make sure I lock it up. Is that okay? Oh, we're going to be here. Oh, really? Well, the people that I'm working with, I can really get some good buying signs from them when they're able to talk, and I can encourage them to make an offer on your property. Is there any way that you could be gone just for that 45 minutes to an hour time frame? If you have a concern or something, maybe once we get there, you could just go outside and walk around for a little bit. Would that be okay? Now I say that because they don't want to do something that's not a benefit to them. If they are the owners, I explain that I'm going to get better buying feedback and buying signs by hearing these people talk inside the home. So they say, oh, that would be a benefit. If I don't give a benefit to them, they're not going to want to do that. If it's a tenant and I'm talking to the tenant, I would say something along the same lines, but I just say, these people may feel a little bit uncomfortable. I'm going to be there. I'll watch over your stuff. If you can just stand outside the front door for a little bit or go in the backyard, and then I'll call you back in as soon as we're done. Would that be okay? Just trying to do something to get that separation. Well, right now with COVID-19, it's a little easier to say, wouldn't it be great if you were not in the house during this, because we don't want to have people get so close to each other. So it's a little easier. But I try to talk about that. And if ask the same questions, anything I should know about the home. Sometimes they'll say a few things that might be beneficial to you. Oh yeah, we have this going on or that, or we plan to do this to the fence in the backyard. Talk about pets, everything. And then at the very end, I just like to say, I'll make sure I turn off the lights and lock it up when I'm done. But forgive me if for some reason I miss one of the lights. Sometimes you can miss them. But it's just something like that to make yourself human. Okay? After I've done that, I'm ready now to go ahead and show the property. Now, everybody can show the home just a little bit different. And I'm not saying this is the way to show homes, but it's just something to keep in mind, and you can modify it to be a little bit more like you. First off, never leave people alone in the home. You don't open up the lockbox and let people inside and be there by themselves. Never open the property and leave it unlocked. It's a failure to account, and I quoted the code there. Like I mentioned before, I like to have 2 MLS printouts. One that's full detail for me, that I've made those notes on, and I'll have another one that's a customer or client copy that I can give to them. Now, I'm going to go through this normally, and then I'm going to talk about COVID-19 because it does change things a little bit. So in the past, I've done this. Sometimes I don't like to touch things and hand them back and forth, so maybe not have copies that I'm sharing with them. So I might give it to them ahead of time, or I could email it to them. But you just have to figure out what's best for you. So I'll have the 2 printouts. Now, before I start off, I want to find out what's going to be best. Do I want to start off at the office and meet people there? Well, for safety and security, I think it's great. We've had deaths of male and female real estate agents throughout the country because somebody met them, at the property or they came to an open house and caused some problems and found that person that was there. In Pocatello, about 15 years ago, we had a problem. And this is how we changed the lock boxes. In Pocatello, we used to have the lock boxes that you used an actual key in it. And what had happened was there were some people, Eddie Pinkerton and some other guys, that had it scheduled for this one property. They had an agent come open up this property to show it to them. And then they were going to have all these different business people come, a copy salesman, another person come over, a banker, and other things at different time frames. So they had it all set up. They took Werner Rosenbaum, who was the broker at RE/MAX for a good number of years, and they had him come over and open up the property to show it to him. So when Werner came inside the property, these gentlemen, I use that term very loosely, put a gun up to his head and said, "Take off all of your clothes," and they put him downstairs in the basement. And one person stayed there with him. Now, take off all your clothes so you're not going to run around and try to escape because you're naked. So that was their plan. But they got the guy's lockbox keys that opened up all the houses in Pocatello, and they had that key. A little bit later, the next person came in, Stan Hales, who now runs the Perkins there in Pocatello. He owned an office product store. So Stan then went into the house because he was going to meet with these people at this location, and they did the same thing to him. They put a gun up to his head and told him to take off his clothes and put him down in the basement. And they did this until they had all these business people that they wanted there. Then their plan was to take them one at a time over to the bank to take out their money. At this point in time, they were building a new bank downtown, and there was some construction being done and some dirt piled up, etc. So they went in one of the person's car, and the guy that was in the car said, "I have no way of knowing what's going to happen." So they went ahead and went up this embankment and crashed the car, got out and ran into one of the banks and said, "I'm a bank robbery. I've been held captive," and all this other stuff. And it was a shock. Pocatello people didn't know what was going on. But the people escaped. Nobody got killed, but that key was gone. And we didn't know what was going to happen. So all the lock boxes in Pocatello were taken off the homes. We contacted the sellers, et cetera, et cetera. So things can happen in Pocatello, in Idaho Falls. Things can happen. So don't show properties alone. Meet with people. Have them meet you at the office so they're at least there. We have cameras and they can see, it records people. And we can see who's there and who went out with you. It even gets to the point where sometimes people will photocopy your driver's license of who you're showing. I think that's wise, just so we know, and they know that we're paying attention. So if something were to happen, we know who we were with. If they're still going to do something, they're still going to do something. But we know who the people were. Now, driving together or driving separately. I used to like to drive together. So I'm going to go through that part, and then COVID-19's changed everything. But I like to drive together. Why? Because I could hear what the people were saying. We could talk about the properties between one and the next. So it was great. I actually bought a minivan back in the day that had sliding doors on both sides. That was one of the first ones. And normally it was just on one side. That had built-in car seats. Because back then you could use the built-in car seats into the things versus now. But I did all these different little things trying to make it as easy as I could so people would ride in my car. We talked. I had, a little cooler with some little drinks or something like that for if we had kids. But back then, if someone came in from out of town, I did everything I could to help them out. Nowadays, you try to be, it's usually a little bit better to be in different cars. And it's sad to say that, but with COVID-19 and things, it's tough to be together. So keep that in mind. Conversation, hearing the discussion, it's great. Who should go? Well, right now, I would have it be as few people as possible. It's always tough when it's a husband and wife, let's say, and they have several kids. Maybe it would be better if they could have those kids be with somebody else right now. In the past, it's always been fun to have the whole family be there and look at the home so they knew what they're searching for. But under the circumstances today, it would probably be better just to have the decisions makers, maybe the husband and wife together, or the couple, or whoever it is that's buying this property, and just have them accompany you. Okay? If there's other people that want to see it later on, you can show the home to them later. Once you've negotiated, come up with the home and you found out what it is, it's the right one for them. You can negotiate it and get it down to that and show everybody that property at that point in time. So a couple things on the screen. Let's just take a look at that for additional COVID-19 things. All parties wear masks. I think that is so important. Hand sanitizer before entering each property. I just take the little hand sanitizer, give it to everybody, they go in. Me, as the agent, I wipe the surfaces down after being touched. So when we go inside a home, I'll explain to them, don't open anything. If you have something you want me to open up, I'll do it. So just don't touch things. Then I go with my Clorox hand sanitizer wipe and I open up the doorknob. I'll turn on the lights and things. So I'm the one that opens the doors and turns on the lights, etc. Now, that makes it kind of tough because typically when you want to show a home to somebody, you want to follow them and let them kind of lead the way, because that way they take the time in the rooms that they want to and they can discuss the things that they want to. But here I have to go ahead of them, turn on the lights so that we have a couple rooms open. So I'll do that really fast, run down the hall, do that and come back. And then I can follow behind them as they go into each room and discuss how it is, etc. If there's a closet that needs to be opened, I'm there with them. I'll open up the closet. But I'm using that hand wipe and I wipe things down when I'm done. You're saying, well, is that overkill? Well, many times we talk to our sellers and we've explained to them that we're going to do everything that we can because they don't want all these people coming through their home. They don't know if these people have COVID-19 or not. It's a sad thing, but you just want to help minimize everything that you can. Okay? All right, looking back to my sheet of paper. So I try to follow them in the property, listen to what they're saying. I'll point out things that they may not notice, and I'll ask them questions about the property. Like if they're really excited about a kitchen, I might say, how do you see yourselves in this kitchen? Do you think this would work for you? And they can say yes or no, or, oh, I wish I had this, or, oh, I really like that. I don't think there's a place here that we could put the microwave or something. So if I hear something that's a negative, I'll try to pull something out so I can explain it to them and say, oh, have you thought about this? Or there's possibility we could do that. to help them understand a little bit more. Now, every price range is different. The lower price range, many times there's not a built-in microwave. In the upper price ranges, you might have a convection oven, microwave, and all this other stuff. Everybody has different concerns and questions. So we need to be able to be that chameleon and kind of modify and answer the questions that they're wanting to know. Okay? Meanwhile, I'll be taking notes as to what they're saying and asking about the property. I'll make notes on my handout as to what may or may not be included. Like if I see a ceiling fan in the kitchen or the living room, dining area, I'll write that down. Type of appliances, so they're stainless steel, and I'll put down Whirlpool, whatever. Because sometimes I've seen people change them between closing and when they were looking at them. Water softener, is it owned, rented? Is there a water purifier? Sometimes on the kitchen sink there might be a water purifier that's not mentioned in the listing, but we could ask for it. A wall air conditioning unit. As we go through it, I might notice items that might need to be fixed. I might notice a tear in the carpet, a stain in the rug, a hole in the wall, different little things, and I'll write those things down so I could be prepared in case this is the home they want to write up an offer on. If there's not a step, if I'm going outside or downstairs and there's not a hand railing, if they're getting an FHA loan, typically you have to have that. And if there's more than 2 steps, like 3. So you'll start to learn what are some of the requirements that will be called out on a property. Chipped or peeling paint, cracked windows, a pop-off valve on the water heater, and it has to be within about 8 inches of the ground, have that pipe on it. It has to have that, they call it an earthquake strap on the water heater. And you'll learn different things. If there's any electrical outlets, or things that are not with a junction box or a cover, anything that doesn't look safe or sanitary, then they'll call things out. So just look for things so that you can make those notes. Now, you don't have to tell the people as you're going through everything, but I make those notes. Now, another thing I do, and it's not a negative thing, but I'm looking for signs for negotiation. If for some reason I go into a house and I see a picture or a note that's on the refrigerator, "Miss you, Daddy," or something like that, then maybe there's a separation here. The person's gone off to work somewhere else and they're having 2 house payments, maybe. Or I've noticed sometimes when we go through the house that one of the closets is totally empty in the master bedroom. And so maybe there was a divorce or something. I write those things down just so I know those things, because then I can understand the negotiation that may need to happen. Okay. Let's see. Take a look at the outside for a bad roof, cracked concrete, problems with the deck or patio, fence, those type of things that you might want to write down. Then always remember, it's still a good idea to leave a business card on the counter when you leave, so the sellers know who it was that came by and that you've been there. Some people don't carry business cards anymore. I still would recommend that you have one just for situations like this. So when I'm done, I'll take out my business card and I'll just go, I have it, and I go ahead and just leave it on the table. And that way they can do some follow-up with their listing agent and say, "Hey, this guy, Mike Johnston from Keller Williams, showed the property." And that way they can get some feedback. The neat thing with our office when we leave cards are, they start to pile up and they see, wow, Keller Williams is really showing our home because there's 5 or 6 Keller Williams cards. And that sends a message to people. So I would recommend that you always leave a business card there when you go, because they'll see that we're out there selling properties for people. Even if it's another company's listing, that doesn't matter. We're going to show everything. But that seller, when it comes down to a time frame that they're wondering, they might say, "Oh, Abigail showed my home 3 times. We're looking for a new agent. I might give her a call." Okay, so it does good to leave those cards. All right. Now I've included in our piece of paper here NAR's, the National Association of Realtors, showing guidance during reopening or the COVID-19. So you can read through here. It just has some information on it before doing stuff. It talks about checking laws, make sure you're aware of keeping distance. They recommend that you do everything that you can for not having an in-person showing. If you can take pictures or other things first, that would be best to narrow it down. only show properties that are really close to what they want or it matches their criteria. Because if it's not even close, why expose people or the home to people that don't even need to do that? And then it talks about after showing things as well. Okay. Any questions on the showing parts? I know that was kind of a brief overview and things are different. I do like to be in the same car with people, but right now I'm suggesting not to do that, but try to get feedback. One time I kept my phone on speakerphone in my car and theirs on speakerphone in their car. It's kind of tough because you get calls coming in all the time, but I did that so we could communicate back and forth as we drove from some of the different homes. That might not be ideal because a lot of calls come in. Sometimes you might want to make a few calls as you're going between homes, but it's an option. Just it was this week. On Monday of this week, there were some people that wanted to take a look at a property from out of town. Well, they wanted to write up an offer on the property sight unseen. I'm not comfortable doing that. So what you can do is you can go over to the property and you can do a Zoom call with your phone and show them the property. That way they can ask questions, they can see it, they have more information that's there. These people, after taking a look at it that way, decided this home wasn't exactly what they wanted, so they chose not to make an offer on it. But if they would have made an offer on it, we would have had these other people excited, and then when they did their inspection, these buyers probably would have canceled and backed out because it wasn't exactly what they wanted. So we need to do a good job of helping do everything that we can for these buyers and get the right property so we can save time and save the headache of many of the sellers. Okay, we're going to go into talking a little bit more about agency. Now, agency is something that's really important that we can discuss that. So we have the blue brochure, the Agency Disclosure Brochure, and we're required to give that to people when? This is when you can unmute a mic and you can say something.
At the most substantial first meeting.
Yep. So the first time you meet them, you're going to, at the first substantial business contact, you're going to give them the blue brochure. Now we have to talk a little bit about when is that considered substantial. If they're at an open house, do you think that's substantial? I think you're okay not to give it to them at an open house. Maybe you have them come into the office and you're doing a buyer consultation and you're talking with these particular people. That's probably an okay time to give them the Agency Disclosure Brochure, the blue brochure as it's called. But for sure, and this is a test question on the test, before you write up an offer, because if you're writing up an offer with them in front of you, I think that's pretty substantial. So that would be the latest time to give them the Agency Disclosure Brochure. Now on the Agency Disclosure Brochure, it has a place where you put down the company name and the company phone number. If you happen to be working on a team, you don't put down the team name and the team's phone number. Why? Everything that you're doing, even if you're an agent on a team, goes through the broker. So I personally am the one liable for every act that you're doing. If you do something wrong, it's as if I did something wrong. If you make a mistake, it's as if I made a mistake. That's why my interests are to help you do everything the right way. So that's why I do these classes. I want to help you understand the things to do. And I have my phone number available, 234-HELP. That's my phone number, 234-HELP. I want you to call me if you have a question. Nights, weekends, I'm okay with that. If for some reason you get a voicemail, maybe it means I'm, I don't know, having dinner or something, but if there's anything that I can do to take the call, I will do it because I want to help you out. But in return for that, I want you to call if it's after hours or things like that, if it's a real concern. If it's something that could wait till the morning, wait till morning. But if not, go ahead and give me a call. So what I do is I'll program your phone number into my phone so I know that it's you when I get a phone call. Because I get a lot of spam calls just like you do on your phones. So if I don't know who the person is and I'm kind of doing something, I may not answer it because I don't know who that person is. Then I'll check the voicemail and know, oh, this is so-and-so. But if I have your information in there, I will answer it as soon as I can. All right. So in Idaho, everyone starts out as a customer. you can become a client by signing a buyer or a seller representation agreement. So in Idaho, we use the buyer representation agreement form, which is the RE14. The listing agreement or the seller representation agreement is the RE16. If you do not have one of those signed, they are not a client. They are a customer. And a lot of times I'll always ask the people when I'm talking to the agent, I'll say, are they a customer or are they a client? Why? We owe different duties to a customer than we do to a client than we do to a customer. When I was managing a real estate office in Pocatello, and I got a phone call from an attorney. I get a lot of phone calls nowadays from attorneys. In fact, today several. But when I get a phone call, typically they'll call up and say, your client so-and-so. Well, when I was in Pocatello, we didn't sign tons of buyer representation agreements because you don't have to. But they'd call up and I say, oh, they were a customer. And then most of the time it cut down on the number of lawsuits or threats of lawsuits. Now, when I first came to Idaho Falls about 6 years ago, a majority of the people felt the only way that they could get paid was if they had a buyer representation agreement. And that's not the case. I suggest when people start off in real estate that if you're going to be quote unquote a doctor, just practice doctor stuff. And if you want to specialize and become a foot doctor later on, that's fine. But don't start doing all these things and saying, I'm a foot doctor when you've never operated on a foot. So you don't need to be a buyer's representative and say that you're going to do all these things that you're not aware of. You can treat people as a customer and start working with them. And as time goes on and you feel more comfortable with the things, then you could represent them. All right? So that would be that they are a customer or a client. Now there's compensation agreements. You can have a compensation agreement with a buyer or a seller, and on my piece of paper it shows the RE12 or RE15 is what you can use to have that. So if you have one of those, that means that the people are still a customer, even though you have a signed document. It's not a representation agreement. On the agency disclosure brochure, it also talks about wire fraud. Why? They just want to make sure that when we're addressing all these buyers and sellers, and we're giving them this blue brochure talking about agency, that we also talk about the possibility of wire fraud. On it also, it talks about sold price. The sold price of a property is not confidential client information for either the buyers or the sellers, and it may be disclosed by the licensee. That's Idaho law. So if you have a property that's listed and you have a buyer that comes in and buys it, and then on their purchase and sell agreement, they say not to disclose the information and not to be used as statistics in the MLS or put it in there, too bad. I, as the broker, will enter the information into the MLS because as we found the property in the MLS, we are going to report it to the MLS. Otherwise, I'm not going to be part of the MLS if I'm not participating. So I explained that. It's not considered confidential information. In fact, many years ago, it was such a hard thing that so many people were keeping the properties out of the MLS that it went before the state legislature. And that's when this law was put into effect, saying that it's not considered confidential client information. Now, that does not mean that we're going to post up the property sales price to everybody. No, we have permission to put it into our multiple listing service where appraisers and others can use it as compiled data to come up with property values. All right. Let's talk about agency. Single agency. So single agency is when an individual is representing 100% that client. So if I have a property listed and I have a sign out in front of the yard, I am representing that seller. And so far, right now, it's single agency. Another person from another office is working with a buyer. They have a signed buyer representation agreement. That would be single agency. They're representing that person. Now what happens, and the problem or confusion starts to rise, is when those two different people get together in a transaction. We have to make sure that we know who's representing whom and how. So I put down a couple different scenarios here for us to take a look at.
The first one. Now, let's talk about with assigned agents. So you have limited dual agency, which means both parties are being represented by the same brokerage firm. So these agents are working for the same company. So with assigned agents, it takes 3 different real estate agents or 3 different people, 3 licensees. So if your office is just you and your broker and there's only 2 people in the office, could you even have assigned agency? No, it takes 3 different people. So the broker is Al. I use the letter A for the first person. So there's 1 person, Al is the broker. The listing agent, Bob, he's the second one. The selling agent, C, Carla, she's the third one. So in this instance, we could have assigned agency, meaning that Bob here works with the Browns, who are the sellers, and Carla works with the Carlsons, who are the buyers. And the broker, he would be the limited dual agent. He's representing both parties, but he cannot negotiate or put one party ahead of the other. While Bob works 100% and negotiates for the sellers. Price, terms, conditions, everything. And Carla is working with the Carlsons. She represents them and can negotiate price, terms, conditions, everything. But the broker is the one that cannot do that. He or she, in this case he, would be the one that's a limited dual. So that's why it's called limited dual agency with assigned agents. Any questions on the assigned agents part? The second part, limited dual agency without assigned agents. Let's use the same scenario. We have broker Al. So there's 1 person. The listing agent is Bob. But Bob also is the selling agent. He has the buyers. So how many different agents do we have here? Are there 3 different people? No, we only have 2 different, the broker and then a salesperson. And this salesperson's working with the sellers and the buyers. So if Bob has a buyer representation agreement, that's what we're assuming in these cases. There's a buyer rep and there's also a listing. Bob cannot assign himself, or the broker cannot assign Bob to represent with his left part of his brain, represent the buyers, and his right part of his brain, represent the sellers. To assign somebody, it has to be an individual. So we cannot have assigned agents in this case. Now with that case, meaning we can't have assigned agency, what ends up happening is you can still assist that person, but you cannot divulge anything from the other party. You basically say, what would you like to offer on the home? Well, why do they do that? Well, you know that they'll accept the list price of $200,000, but you cannot divulge their motivation to sell or where they're moving or all these other things without their permission. So you can't harm them. And the same thing with the buyer. You might know that these guys will pay full price on the home, but they want to try to get a good deal. So you can't disclose that to the seller. You're limited on what you can do. So you're a limited agent. Same thing using the next example that's on there. Same type of thing. There's only 2 different people. So broker Al is also the listing agent. And then Carla has the buyers. Can we have assigned agency there? No. We only have 2 people again. So we can't do that. Now, one of the benefits at our office is we have a lot of people there. Do you know how many transactions we closed last month's units? I think it was like 612 or 615. That's a lot. That's more than the whole MLS in Pocatello did. And that's just our office.
I think we broke the record in July, and then in August we broke our new record.
Our new record. Yeah, because we had like 500 and something in July and 600 and something in August. Now, with that in mind, there could be some problems with agency in our office. We might not be able to have assigned agency. Well, one of the benefits is me as the broker, I am a non-competing broker, which means I normally do not go out and list and sell. If I was out listing and selling, I would be kind of like on that scenario there showing Al, the broker. We couldn't have assigned agency. And that would make it tough because we couldn't negotiate 100% on the party's behalf. Now, that doesn't mean I don't go out and list and sell once in a while.
Typically, I might have 1 or 2 transactions a year that I do. Why? I want to stay up to date on what I'm doing, so that's good for me. But the other benefit is for all of the agents in the office. They know that it's possible you could be assigned to work with the party that you're working with, because I, as the broker, will be the limited dual agent. So there's a lot of benefits for us with that, okay? So being a non-competing broker. All right. It talks about a disclosure on there that real estate licensees are not inspectors, and it talks about audio video surveillance. I remember once going into a home and they had a camera running, and the people end up getting a phone call that says, there's people showing the house right now and they have their shoes on, and it says to please remove the shoes. So the agent calls the other agents who's showing the home and says, oh, my seller just called me and told me that your people aren't taking their shoes off. So people are noticing and seeing things all the time, what's happening. So just be prepared. They could be recording what's going on, and they could hear you talking about your negotiation skills or something. So just be cautious. Now, we are required that if you do have a camera in the home, as a listing agent, I would just put it up on inside, not so everybody outside knows, but inside you can just say, property currently under surveillance. Why? Because in Idaho, at least one party has to know that it's being recorded. If you ever gone into the Walmart parking lot and you see those signs up there that has the video camera happening, or says surveillance type stuff, that's so that they can let you know that you're being recorded, because the party needs to know. So they have that disclosed. Same thing with our listings. We should do that. However, we might not know, or somebody might not be following the law. So we need to make sure we explain that to our buyers. So sometimes you don't do a lot of talking inside negotiation wise. Do that in the car or a little bit later on. Okay, make sure the name of the brokerage is on there and the phone number. Customer client would sign it, make sure they get a copy of it, and here's a website that you can download the agency brochure a little bit more. Now let's have a little bit of an activity for agency in general, and this is where you're going to want to keep this handout forever and ever and ever. Why? I'm going to go through different scenarios of who's representing whom or not representing somebody, so you know how to mark that paragraph 35 on the purchase and sell agreement. So when I teach the class on the RE-21, the purchase and sell agreement, I have this information in there. But I added for today a graphic that has red little X's on there that shows you how to mark it. Before I just said what to do. So let's read the scenario first. It's just a paragraph, and then we'll look at that picture. Okay? The first one. If you have a buyer's representation agreement signed with the buyers and the listing is with another company, you would mark the boxes as follows. So it said that you have a buyer representation. So the brokerage working with the buyers is acting as an agent for the buyer. So you'd mark the first section, section 1A. Then it said, and so that's the buyers, and the listing is with another company. So that means the company working with the sellers is an agent for the seller. So that would be A and A. Does that make sense? Second one, if you do not have a buyer's representation agreement and the listing is with another company, so same as number one, except for you don't have a buyer's rep agreement, it would be D, the brokerage working with the buyers is a non-agent for the buyers, and then A, because they still are being represented by that other office. So that would be that situation. Let's change it up a little bit. If you have a buyer's representation agreement signed with the buyers and the agent working with the sellers does not have a seller representation agreement, could be like a builder, or there might not be an agent involved. It could be a for sale by owner. Then you'd mark the boxes as follows. Agent working with the buyers is representing them, so that would be A. And the brokerage working with the sellers is a non-agent for the seller, so that would be D. Now I often get asked on the purchase and sell agreement on the very first page, that's the point of contact. Who's working with the buyer, who's working with the seller. Because if you don't have a buyer representation agreement with the buyer, you're not going to not put your name on that first page. So that's not the representation part. Paragraph 35, where we have this check box is where you do that. So on that first page, if you're working with a for sale by owner and you're the point of contact, you can put yourself down as the listing agent and listing agent C. You don't have it listed, but you're the point of contact to work with the seller. So the first page is point of contact. Paragraph 35 is the agency confirmation of who's representing whom, if they are. Okay? So that would be that part. The next one. If you do not have a buyer's representation agreement signed with the buyers, and the agent working with the sellers does not have a seller representation agreement, a listing signed with the sellers, like a builder or for sale by owner, you'd mark the boxes as follows. They'd both be D. The brokerage working with the buyers is a non-agent for the buyers. The brokerage working with the sellers is acting as a non-agent for the sellers. Here's where it can be a little bit more confusing. When you're working, you have a buyer representation agreement and you're working with a buyer, and it's one of your own company's listings. So it's another Keller Williams agent. How do you mark it? Well, it depends. Typically, you can mark it B and B or C and C. So you don't put a B and a C. They have to, the middle two have to be the same if you mark it that way. And why? And what do they mean? They mean if it's with assigned agents or without. If you have it listed and you're on a team and it's another team member and you have the same transaction coordinator, somebody looking at the files, etc., you cannot have assigned agency or an assigned agent. Why? Because the information that's held confidential is going through that transaction coordinator or through that combined group of people. So you cannot do that. So if that's the case, then it would be B and B. Limited dual agency without assigned agents. But let's say that you are on one team and the other person is on a different team in the office. So it could be Murdoch and Manwaring. The other one could be the Anderson Hicks. Well, you have different people that are involved. You're in the same office, but you don't have the same transaction coordinator or same person helping you out. So you could have assigned agency with that, assigned agents. How about you're an individual agent and the seller, the listing agent's an individual agent, but you both use Amy to help you with your transaction coordinating. Then you can't have assigned agency with that either because you have the same transaction coordinator that's receiving the confidential information that could unknowingly say something or disclose something to somebody else. Okay, so that's where it comes down to how you would mark this next section here. So on here, it could either be C and C if you can have the assigned agents, or it would be B and B if it's going to stay limited dual without the assigned agents. So keep this piece of paper to help you remember when you're writing stuff up. Worst case, you can always call me at what number? 234-HELP. Last one on this. If you do not have a buyer's representation agreement with the buyers and the listing is with the same company, you would mark the boxes as follows. The brokerage working with the buyers is a non-agent for the buyers, and the brokerage working with the sellers is acting as an agent for the sellers. So that makes it rather simple there with that. Are there any questions about agency or any of the things that we covered today? Because it is now 4 o'clock and we've been talking for our 1 hour.